Have you ever wondered about the effects of using shutter speed when filming videos? When is it appropriate to use a slow or a fast shutter speed? This video is going to go into detail about what your shutter speed setting does to your image with regards to video. Before we get right into it, I would just like to introduce myself as the bearded content creator, Anthony Zammit. Oh geez, that was pretty cheesy. Shutter speed is the length of time that the sensor in your camera is exposed to light. For example, a shutter speed of 1/100th of a second lets in half the amount of light that a shutter speed of 1/50th of a second does. Hence, it is directly proportional. Shutter speed is only one part of the exposure triangle. The other two parts of the exposure triangle are aperture and ISO, but these will be explained in future videos. But shutter speed is not only about controlling the amount of light hitting your sensor, but it is also responsible for a phenomenon known as motion blur. Motion blur is the blur seen in objects that are moving during the time it takes to record the frame. This movement gets recorded as blur. The slower you set your shutter speed, the more motion blur you will introduce into your video. The faster you set your shutter speed, the less motion blur you will capture. If you introduce a fast enough shutter speed, you may possibly have no motion blur in your moving objects at all. One thing to remember is that when you set a faster shutter speed, your sensor in your camera will be exposed to less light and hence your image will become darker. As for setting a slower shutter speed, your sensor will be exposed to more light and hence your image will appear brighter. To imagine this, picture the shutter in your camera to be the front door of your house, and the inside of your house being considered as your camera's sensor. When you set a slow shutter speed, you are basically opening the door wide open to a bright sunny day and leaving it open for longer such that more light enters into your house before closing it. When setting a fast shutter speed, you are basically closing the door much faster and therefore less light is entering into your house. That was a completely crap analogy, but I really hope it makes sense to you. With regards to video, there is a really important relationship between frames per second and shutter speed. Frames per second is a setting in your camera which captures a certain amount of frames in a single second. Now the rule of thumb is that the most natural motion blur occurs when your shutter speed is double your frame rate. For example, if you set your frame rate to be 24 frames per second, then you should set your shutter speed to 1/48th of a second. Now, this isn't available in most cameras, just like my one, so you have to set it to the closest one, which is 1/50th of a second. This particular rule is known as the 180-degree shutter rule, and is something I use for most shoots that I do. As we now know that a slower shutter speed increases motion blur, we can use this effect in the following ways. If you want to show that your character is drunk, the added motion blur can give the audience an offsetting feeling that the character isn't their normal self. You could also use it to shoot small B-roll clips of dance floor scenes where the lights streak across the image due to the disco lights. A rather artistic image. It can also be used for a dreamlike sequence. These are just some examples, so get creative and see what you can come up with. Using a faster shutter speed can make your scene look harsh and unnatural. It can leave you with a jittery, unsettled feeling. Some examples of where this technique can be used include the following. A high-action war scene, as it gives a high-intensity feel. This technique was famously used in the war film Saving Private Ryan. It can also be used when filming wildlife, such as a cheetah chasing its prey. The reason behind this is that you would rather capture more detail than blur at such high speeds. It can also be used when filming fast action sports such as a Formula 1 race to provide a crisp, clean image rather than leaving streak paths due to unnecessary motion blur. Now that you understand how shutter speed affects your image in your videos, use it to your advantage to tell your story. If you have any questions regarding this topic, please message in the comment section below. If you like this style of tutorials and would like to learn more about the other two parts of the exposure triangle, please let me know with a like or a comment. To help support this channel, hit that big red subscribe button down below. Thanks for watching everyone, and I'll see you in the next one. Booyah!